The sky was quiet and cold as the massive railgun floated in orbit above Neptune, its long metal spine glowing with heat and power. Commander Elias Cole stood on the command deck of the orbital station Helix, his eyes locked on the countdown screen. 5 seconds remained until history changed forever. This was not a test, and it was not a bluff. This was a warning. One single shot to let the alien empire, known as the Zarek, know that humanity would not back down. The railgun had taken 10 years to build. It was longer than 10 aircraft carriers and powered by 3 stars' worth of energy collected over decades. Its purpose was simple: fire a tungsten spike the size of a skyscraper at near light speed, enough to destroy a moon or crack a planet's crust. But today it would only pass near the Zarek fleet parked at the edge of the solar system. A near miss, just to show them what humans could do. Cole took a breath as the timer hit 0. He did not blink as the shot fired. There was no sound in space, but the entire station shook like thunder from the inside. A white-hot streak tore across the dark sky. For a moment nothing happened. Then silence. Not the kind of silence that comes with quiet. This was different. The Zarek fleet was gone. No explosion, no lights, no debris. Just empty space, where 20 ships used to be. Everyone on Helix stared at the screens, trying to understand. Cole gave orders to scan again. Still nothing. They checked comms. No signals from the Zarek. Not even a distress call. It was like they had been erased. Back on Earth, the news was hidden from the public. Only High Command knew what happened. Some celebrated, thinking the shot had scared the aliens away. Others felt a deep chill in their bones. 2 days later, another silence came. Then another. Alien beacons across the stars went dark. Planets that used to send bright signals every day were now mute. Galactic chatter stopped like someone had pulled a plug. A week passed. Dr. Lynn Eris, head of the Deep Space Listening Network, sat in a room filled with receivers. She had tracked alien noise all her life. Now the charts were flat. The background hum of the universe was fading. It had always been there like wind. Now it was vanishing. She thought it was a malfunction until her team checked other stations. All said the same. The stars were growing quiet. Not just the Zarek. Other civilizations were disappearing. Not destroyed. Just gone. Cole met with Dr. Eris in secret on the moon base. He showed her the flight data from the shot. It had passed near the Zarek fleet. It had not touched them. But now they were gone. They looked at each other. Neither could explain it. Eris asked if the railgun had anything alien in it. Cole hesitated, then nodded. There was tech found years ago from a dead system. It helped them understand energy fields in a new way. No one knew where it came from. It just worked. Eris said they may have woken something. Not scared the Zarek, but triggered something deeper. Something watching from beyond. The next day her team picked up a strange echo from the edge of the galaxy. Not a voice. Not language. Just a whisper like a ripple in space. They amplified it. It was not natural. It had rhythm like breath or heartbeat, but slow and massive. The stars kept going quiet. One by one their light dimmed. Not physically. Just their noise. Their presence. On Helix, the railgun began to hum again. It was not charged. No one had activated it. But it pulsed like it was alive. Like it remembered. Cole stood alone in the railgun chamber and placed his hand on the control panel. It was cold and still. Then a whisper reached his ear. Not through sound, but through his mind. A feeling like falling into darkness. The message was simple. You fired first. Cole pulled his hand back and turned to leave. He ordered a lockdown. But he knew it was too late. Something had awakened. And now the stars were listening. Or maybe they were afraid. As Earth turned slowly in the distance, and the railgun floated in silence, a cold question hung in the air. What had they really fired at? And more importantly, what had fired back? The sun rose slowly over Earth, but no one cared about sunlight anymore. People still went to work, and children still played in the streets, but the silence in space had changed something deep and quiet in the hearts of those who knew. Up in orbit above Mars, a secret meeting took place between the heads of command and the lead scientists of the listening network. The silence was spreading. 106 known alien signals had vanished. Some were strong signals from warships or colonies, and others were faint messages from peaceful worlds. All gone. Dr. Lynn Eris stood before a dark room filled with screens and high-ranking officers. She showed them the same thing she had shown Elias Cole. No damage, no trace, just silence. The universe was losing its voice. They asked her if it was an attack. She said no. If it was war, there would be wreckage. There would be lights and fire. But this was like pulling threads from a cloth, until only empty space remained. The room stayed quiet. No one wanted to believe the truth that something bigger than war had begun. Meanwhile, a stealth ship named the Echo Lantern prepared to launch from the moon. Its mission was to travel to a colony that used to belong to the Xeric Empire. The colony was called Halon Prime. It was one of the brightest and most advanced alien cities known to humans. If anyone was still out there, they would be on Halon Prime. The crew was small. Dr. Lynn Eris led the mission with 5 specialists, each one chosen for skill and silence. They did not talk much. There was no need to. They knew this was not a rescue. It was a search for answers, maybe even a farewell. The Echo Lantern left orbit and entered deep space. The engines hummed softly, and the stars drifted past the windows like cold fire. It took 2 days to reach the edge of the old Xeric sector. By now over 200 signals had gone silent. They reached Halon Prime and slowed into orbit. From above it looked normal. City stood tall with silver towers and blue domes. Lights still blinked on landing platforms. There were no signs of battle or destruction. They sent out a greeting pulse in all known languages. Nothing answered. They landed near a main city hub and stepped onto the surface. The air was clean, the gravity stable, temperature perfect. But there were no people. They walked through empty streets. Shops filled with goods. Tables set for meals. Vehicles parked mid-motion. It looked like life had stopped in the middle of a breath. Dr. Eris moved carefully through the halls of a science dome. She looked at computers still running and machines still humming. But no hands touched them. She called out. Her voice echoed through the rooms, with no reply. The team searched for bodies, but found none. Not even bones. Only shadows of what had been. They entered a central tower and found a viewing chamber that overlooked the city. It felt like a ghost was breathing in the wind. Then one of the crew shouted from below. They found something in the sand behind the tower. It was burned deep into the ground. A symbol. It was the same symbol used on the human railgun projectile. The crew stared at it. No one spoke for a long time. The meaning was clear. The shot had reached here, even if it never hit. They began to scan the city for signs of the projectile. Maybe it had landed nearby. They followed a weak energy trail that led to the edge of a mountain. There it was, stuck deep into the rock. The projectile, still glowing faint blue, still humming softly, untouched by weather or time. Dr. Eris approached it slowly. She felt something in her chest. Not fear, not wonder, something stranger, like being watched by the night sky itself. One of the younger crew members reached out to touch it. They warned him not to, but he laughed and said it was just a metal spike. He placed his hand on it. He vanished. Not disappeared in a flash. Not pulled away. He simply was there and then was not. His name was Caleb. They searched for him. Called out. Checked every scanner. But he was nowhere. Dr. Eris sat down near the spike and closed her eyes. She felt the hum moving through her bones. It was not just energy. It was sound without sound. A kind of signal that spoke not in words but in memory. She saw flashes. Stars going dim. Civilizations frozen mid-step. Ships drifting without crew. Not destroyed. Not killed. But erased. She opened her eyes and backed away. This was not a weapon. It was a key. And they had used it. Back on Earth, Cole stood in front of a locked door deep in a hidden facility. The railgun had powered up again for no reason. It was not supposed to. He had ordered it shut down after the first shot. But now it glowed with the same hum as the spike on Halon Prime. The engineers said it was reacting to signals from deep space. Unknown signals. Faint, but growing. He asked them to show him the signal. What he saw was a pattern. Slow, deep, heavy, like something breathing beneath the stars. The AI built to listen to alien sound began to change. It no longer recorded. It began to speak. It said the signals were not from technology. They were from something alive, something ancient, and something awake. Dr. Eris sent her report back to Earth. She wrote one sentence. The silence is not natural. It is chosen. Her message was delayed by 6 minutes longer than normal. That had never happened before. On board the Echo Lantern, the crew locked the doors and watched the stars. One of them said they felt cold even though the heat was working fine. No one slept that night, and far beyond what they could see, a flicker of light vanished from the map. Another star gone silent. The stars no longer sang. The silence grew heavier with each passing hour. On board the Echo Lantern, Dr. Lynn Eris stared at the glowing railgun spike buried deep in the alien mountain. Its hum was steady and strange, like a machine remembering a dream. The crew stood around it, afraid to go near after Caleb vanished without a trace. They returned to the ship without speaking. No one wanted to admit what they all felt. They were being watched, not by eyes, but by something deeper, like the space around them had a mind. Inside the ship, the engineers reviewed every scan. No radiation, no heat, no known energy signature. And yet, when they touched the scan panel, their hands tingled, like tiny voices were moving through their skin. Dr. Eris ordered the ship sealed and the spike left untouched. She uploaded her findings to Earth, but the signal bounced 3 times, blocked once by Mars and once by Saturn. The data came through, but corrupted in parts. Something was interfering with transmission. Back on Earth, Commander Elias Cole watched the corrupted file. The symbols flashed across the screen. Not numbers, not words, just shapes, repeating over and over like a warning in a language no one could read. He called for Dr. Selenvara. She had worked on ancient code from dead alien systems. She looked at the shapes for hours. Then she asked to be alone. She returned later with pale skin and shaking hands. She said the shapes matched something from decades ago. A probe sent to the edge of the galaxy had once found ruins. Nothing alive, but walls covered in symbols. Warnings. Do not disturb. Do not awaken. Do not speak. Those were the closest translations they had. And now the same symbols appeared in the corrupted railgun data. Cole asked where the probe had been. Selen whispered the name. The Tomb Field. It was a starless part of space, a region where over 50 exploration ships had vanished. No sound ever came back from it. Only that one probe had returned. The tomb. The silence. The same hum. He connected the dots, and his breath caught in his throat. They had built the railgun using energy science, found in a crashed object near Jupiter. They never knew its origin. Now they did. It came from the Tomb Field. Back on the Echo Lantern, Dr. Eris began to hear whispers in her sleep. Not words, but ideas, like emotions being poured into her dreams. She saw stars blinking out like candles in wind. She saw cities frozen in time, and a darkness that fed not on flesh but on memory. She woke with tears and could not remember why. The AI on board the ship had been silent since launch. It now spoke. One sentence only. They are listening. The crew gathered in the control room. The ship's sensors had picked up movement. Not physical, not mass, but pressure. The kind of wave made when space itself bends. A signal came through. One long pulse. Then a pause. Then 2 short pulses. Selen recognized it. It was old Zarek. A distress pattern. But it was altered. Like something else was imitating it. Repeating it without meaning. They traced the signal to a nearby asteroid belt. The Echo Lantern moved in slowly. Cameras scanned each rock. They found a Zarek ship. Not damaged. Just empty. No lights. No heat. Drifting in silence. They docked and entered. Inside they found frozen air. No crew. No signs of struggle. Yet the ship looked like it had just arrived. Plates of food sat on tables. Screens flickered with unread messages. One of the crew touched a panel. The lights went out. In total darkness. They heard it. A whisper. low and deep, not from any speaker, not from any mouth, but from within. The lights returned, and a message blinked on every screen. You opened the door. They left the ship at once. No one spoke until they were back aboard the Echo Lantern. Dr. Eris asked if the door could be closed. No one had an answer. The AI said another thing. They do not destroy. They remove. Cole received the update and stood before the railgun. It pulsed with slow blue light. The hum had spread to nearby systems. Even when unpowered, the hum remained. He looked at the engineers and asked if they could dismantle it. They tried. Welds broke. Tools failed. Energy fields shifted. It would not be touched. He stood there thinking, what if the shot had not awakened something far, but something near, something inside the weapon? The final report from Dr. Eris came in. She included a new scan. The spike was no longer metal. Its structure had changed. Still solid, but now shifting slowly, like it was alive. The shape bent under the scanner, like it knew it was being watched. She ended the report with a final warning. The silence is not the end. It is the beginning. That night, all across Earth, people began to feel it. Nightmares of stars blinking out. Dreams of floating in silence. Memories fading. A child woke screaming and could not remember their name. A scientist forgot her own research as she stared at her hands. A pilot on Mars tried to radio for help, but his voice never reached the air. The stars, the voices, the signals, all going quiet, and somewhere between galaxies, in a place without light, something ancient stirred. It did not see. It did not feel. It remembered, and it was listening again. A storm was building inside the stars, not of fire or wind, but of silence. A silence that carried weight and memory, and something much older than thought. Elias Cole stood on the edge of the railgun platform, watching the sky beyond the glass. The weapon no longer needed power. It had become something else. Its metal skin shifted slowly, now, like it was breathing, like it was dreaming. No human hands could touch it anymore. Not without disappearing. Not without losing pieces of memory. Even standing near it made thoughts slip and drift away like smoke. Dr. Selenvara had locked herself in the archives under the Mars Command Center. She read through old mission files and alien relic reports. She found something buried deep. A mission classified long before the railgun was even an idea. It had been called Operation Gray Echo. A research ship had found an ancient object in a dead system. The object had no heat, no sound, no mass. Yet it bent time and energy around it like water. They tried to move it, and the moment they did, 3 ships vanished. Not exploded, not destroyed. They just went missing from every camera and every memory. Only the logs of Gray Echo remained, and those logs were incomplete. Half the files were blank, like someone had wiped them clean. Selen called Cole and showed him the records. He listened in silence as she spoke. The power core design used for the railgun, the energy pulse, the containment field, it all came from reverse engineering that ancient object. The scientists back then had called it the Eye. They believed it was a key, but they never found the door. Now they had fired it, and the door was no longer closed. Back on the Echo Lantern, Dr. Lynn Eris sat in the dark of her private cabin. She had stopped sleeping. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the same thing. Not voices, but waves. Waves of memory not her own. She began to write them down. Words from lost languages. Images of cities she had never seen. And always the hum. Low and endless, like space itself was singing. One morning she woke with blood on her hands. She had carved a symbol into the metal wall beside her bed. The same symbol burned into the mountain on Halon Prime. The crew watched her carefully. They whispered when she passed. None of them felt safe anymore. Not from outside, but from within. The railgun spike buried in the mountain had changed shape again. Now it pulsed in rhythm with the ship's systems. Even though it was miles away, even though it had no connection, the AI had gone silent. Then one day it began to speak again, but not in words. It sang. A single tone. Rising. Falling. A melody that had no end and no beginning. The tone matched something found in a forgotten probe, from 50 years ago. The same tone had once been detected near the tomb field. Cole called for every scientist who had worked on the Railgun project. Most were missing. Others had no memory of what they built. Some spoke in circles. One wrote a message on the wall before vanishing. It said, "We opened a lock, not a door." The Railgun platform began to heat up. No one was powering it. No fuel was being used. Yet it glowed brighter every day. A small moon near the edge of the system lost its orbit and drifted into the sun. The gravity equations made no sense. Something had changed. Selin told Cole that the object used for the Railgun, was not a machine. It was a warning. It had been buried deep inside a lifeless world for a reason, left there by something afraid of what was behind the lock. And humanity, without knowing, had picked it up and fired it into space. On board the Echo Lantern, the ship systems began to flicker. Memories began to fade again. 2 crew members forgot how to speak. One drew star maps that led nowhere. Dr. Eris recorded a message. She looked into the camera with tired eyes. Her voice was calm, but her hand shook. She said, "This is not about war, not about weapons. We pulled a thread in the fabric of the universe, and now the pattern is unraveling." She closed the message with a single phrase, "Do not fire again." But back on Earth, the Railgun was no longer listening. It began to pulse with light and heat. Waves of energy moved across nearby systems. Satellites lost power. Drones stopped responding. Then it spoke, not in voice, but in memory. People across Earth had dreams. All the same dream. A sky filled with stars, each one blinking out slowly. And in the center, a shape with no form. A thing not seen but known. A presence that fed not on life, but on history. A presence that removed. Every person who woke from the dream forgot something. A name. A birthday. A promise. Piece by piece. The world was fading. Selin watched the power logs. She saw that the Railgun was charging, but no one had touched the controls. She screamed into the comms. Ordered a shutdown. Pulled wires. Disabled systems. Nothing worked. The Railgun had become its own command. Cole stood before the weapon one last time. He placed his hand on the metal. It no longer felt solid. It felt like air trapped in time. He whispered, "What are you?" And something answered, not in words, not in sound, but in thought. A shape filled his mind. A void filled with silence. A place where light went to sleep. He saw stars blinking, not because they died, but because they were forgotten. He saw civilizations turning to dust, not from fire, but from silence. He fell back and gasped. This was not just a weapon. This was a beacon, and it had been fired into the dark, calling something that should have stayed asleep, something that had no name. But soon, everyone would remember, and after that, no one would remember anything at all. The stars were fading one by one, as if the universe was slowly forgetting itself. No fire, no explosion, no collapse. Just silence. A silence so deep it swallowed light and memory together. On board the Echo Lantern, Dr. Lynn Eris floated in the command deck, her eyes locked on the readings, pouring across the screen. They were no longer signals. They were patterns. Frequencies without a source. Like echoes from a forgotten voice repeating forever. The crew was no longer speaking much. One had forgotten his own name. Another could no longer read. They moved through the halls like ghosts trapped in a machine that kept drifting through space. The spike still hummed in the mountain. Now its glow could be seen from orbit. It pulsed with the rhythm of something ancient. Something not born in this galaxy. Not born in any. Dr. Eris found herself sketching strange shapes in her notebook. She did not know what they meant, but her hand moved on its own. Circles within circles. Lines that never ended. Symbols that felt older than stars. Back on Earth, Elias Cole sat in silence in the dark room beneath the Railgun platform. The weapon now floated above the surface, held in a zero-gravity chamber. No machine touched it. No cable powered it. Yet it shone brighter than the sun. Every hour the background hum of space grew quieter. The listening network had confirmed it. The static noise of cosmic radiation that had always existed the sound of the universe breathing. It was fading. Dr. Selenvara had isolated the wave. She showed Cole the frequency. It was not random. It was a signal, a countdown, but not to something that would happen, to something that had already begun. She said the silence was not just the absence of sound. It was the presence of something that devoured it. Stories from ancient civilizations had spoken of such things. Whispers in dead languages. Records found in ruins buried under ice and dust. They spoke of the ones who devour sound, beings so old they had no name, no body, no voice, only purpose. Not to conquer, not to rule, but to unmake. They slept between galaxies, where no light could reach, waiting for a sound that should never be made. And humanity had made it. The firing of the railgun, the pulse that crossed the stars, the hum that echoed in every system. It was a voice, a call, and they had heard it. On board the Echo Lantern, the crew watched as another star blinked out from their charts. It was not dead. Its light still reached them, but every signal from its orbit had vanished. A colony gone, a trade route silent, thousands of lives forgotten. Dr. Eris began to hear the tone again, not through speakers, not through sensors, but in her thoughts. It was soft, almost kind, like a lullaby for the end of everything. She recorded herself speaking, then played it back. There was no sound. Her voice had been removed. Cole met with Selen in the lowest chamber of the lunar base. She carried a small device built from the oldest alien tech ever recovered. She called it the Veil. The Veil could shield thought. It was used once by a dying race who feared memory could be hunted. They had failed, but the idea remained. She activated it, and the hum disappeared. Not outside, but within. For a moment, there was peace. Cole asked her if it could be scaled. She said maybe, but there was no time. The railgun was beginning to fire again. The pulse was building on its own. They could not stop it. They could not disconnect it. It had become a lighthouse in a sea of silence, and the things it called were almost here. Dr. Eris made one last trip to the surface of Halon Prime. She stood before the spike, now almost completely transformed. It was no longer metal. It was light shaped like memory. It pulsed with her heartbeat, or maybe she pulsed with its. She touched the edge, and she saw them, not with her eyes, not with her mind, but with something deeper. Shapes that were not shapes, colors without light, movements without form. They moved between stars not by speed, but by forgetting where they were. They did not kill. They did not invade. They simply erased. Civilizations, planets, thoughts, everything they touched stopped being. Not broken, not shattered, just gone. No record, no name, no story. She fell back and screamed without sound. The crew pulled her into the ship. She wrote down one phrase over and over. They are almost here. Back on Earth, Cole stood before a global council. He told them everything. The truth. The silence. The countdown. They argued. They denied. They feared. But the stars kept going quiet. And one day, Earth's moon stopped sending echoes. The machine still worked. The lights still shone. But every attempt to call, to listen, to reach, failed. The moon was still there, but it had been forgotten. And Earth was next. Selen activated the veil over the railgun chamber. It dulled the hum, slowed the pulse, but could not stop it. The weapon was alive now, a memory given shape, a signal that could never be taken back. The final report from Dr. Eris came through. It said, if they reach us, we will not die. We will not suffer. We will be removed, as if we never were. And in that moment, humanity understood. This was not war. This was the end of sound, the end of history, the end of knowing. The stars, the voices, the dreams, all fading. And soon, even the silence would forget them. The stars no longer answered. The galaxies once filled with color and sound had turned gray and cold. Earth stood alone in the dark, surrounded by silence so deep it felt like the universe had taken a breath and never let it go. Elias Cole stood before the railgun one last time. The weapon was no longer a tool. It had become a doorway, a mouth that had spoken, a voice that had summoned something not meant to be heard. The veil shield hummed quietly around the chamber. Built from forgotten alien technology, it had slowed the pulse. But now even the veil trembled. The pulse had changed. It was no longer just energy. It was a pattern, a shape, a name being whispered in the dark. Dr. Selenvara ran diagnostics again. Her fingers moved fast over the control panel. But the numbers no longer obeyed the laws of physics. Time itself seemed to bend inside the chamber. Clocks ticked backward. Screens flickered with data from systems no longer connected. They had one chance left. A reverse pulse. A counter wave. A final voice to say no. Selen believed if they could match the original energy signature and fire it back into the void, they might be able to close the path they had opened. But they would have to do it before the next memory fell. Earth was already slipping. Museums no longer held their names. Books turned blank. People forgot the taste of food they loved. Songs vanished from recordings. And worst of all, dreams had stopped. No one dreamed anymore, as if the part of the mind that wandered had been the first to be erased. Dr. Lynn Eris stood in the main chamber of the Echo Lantern. Her crew was gone. Some had vanished. Others had simply forgotten how to live. One sat in the corner whispering to a doll made of wire. Another stared into the dark window, repeating a name that never existed. Only she remained aware. She held the last memory of the mountain spike, the final vision, the final shape. It had shown her the arrival, not in ships, not in light, but in forgetting. They did not come from a place. They came from an idea that once spoken could never be unheard. She opened the final channel to Earth. Her voice barely held together, but it carried the truth. They are almost here. You must speak one last time, but speak not with power. Speak with memory. Cole listened to her voice echo across the chamber. He nodded. Selen activated the core. The railgun charged faster than ever before. The pulse built inside it like a storm of light and sound and forgotten names. They had used alien science to build a weapon. Now they would use it to send a story. The story of humanity. Selen linked the railgun core to the memory vault. A backup of Earth's art, music, language, faces, places. Everything. They would fire not a weapon, but a message. A final voice. Into the dark. The hum grew louder. The light brighter. The chamber shook. Outside in the cities, people looked up. They no longer knew why. But something inside them stirred. A sense of loss. A feeling of goodbye. The children cried without reason. The old spoke in forgotten tongues. The animals fell silent and stared at the sky. The stars blinked once. Then again. The pulse reached its peak. Cole closed his eyes and whispered, "We were here." Selen hit the release. The railgun fired. But no heat. No metal. No light. Only memory. Only sound. A wave of everything humanity had ever been. Shot into the place where silence lived. Across the system the hum stopped. Across the universe the pattern paused. The silence bent. Time held its breath. On Halon Prime the mountain spike cracked. Its light faded. Its pulse ended. On the Echo Lantern, Dr. Eris smiled. And then she slept. Not from fear. Not from loss. But from peace. Back on Earth the sky shimmered for a moment. And then the stars sang again. Not loud. Not clear. But soft. Like a forgotten song remembered by a child. The memory had reached them. And the ones in the dark had listened. They did not understand war. They did not fear power. But they remembered the voice. The voice that said, "We lived. We laughed. We loved. And we are not ready to be forgotten." For the first time in many days, people dreamed. Selen watched the monitors slowly return to normal. Clocks moved forward. Screens held their data. Books regained their words. She looked at Cole and smiled. It worked. But deep inside the chamber, the railgun remained silent. No hum. No light. As if it too had closed its eyes. As if it too had remembered. Cole walked alone through the empty halls of the station. He passed photos of those who had vanished. He whispered their names. And this time, he knew they would not be lost. The silence still lived out there. But now it remembered a voice. A small voice. a human voice. And that voice had said, "No, not yet, not today." And in the darkness beyond stars, something ancient turned away, not in anger, not in hate, but in understanding. And the stars, one by one, began to shine again. The stars were singing again, but the song was slow and soft like a memory drifting through time. Earth had survived the silence. The gray hum had stopped. The whispers were gone. The sky was no longer empty. It held light. It held sound. And it held something even greater. A memory. Commander Elias Cole stood at the edge of the observation deck, looking out at the repaired railgun platform. The massive machine was now quiet. No pulses. No glow. No hum. Just steel. Just silence. But not the same silence that had once crawled through space like a shadow. This silence was peaceful. Dr. Selin Vara stood beside him. She held a data pad filled with logs from across the system. Mars was stable. The colonies had regained contact. Ships were flying again. Satellites were singing. And the veil had held. Below them, teams worked to dismantle parts of the railgun. Carefully. Gently. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Cole knew the truth. The railgun had done what no voice could. It had shouted into the dark. It had cried out with everything they were. And the dark had listened. Dr. Lynn Aris had not returned from the Echo Lantern. Her last message was simple. They remember now. That is enough. Her ship had drifted beyond signal range days ago. Some believed she had followed the memory into the quiet. Others thought she was still out there watching, guarding, listening. Earth began to rebuild. But something had changed. People remembered things they had never learned. Languages they had never spoken. Songs they had never heard before. Children painted stars with names no one taught them. Old songs played on instruments untouched for years. Voices whispered stories in dreams. Stories from places humanity had never visited. Selin believed the memory wave had returned more than it sent, that in giving away all that they were, they had received echoes from all that had been lost. The ancient ones, the vanished, the forgotten. Pieces of them now lived in human thought, not as threats, not as ghosts, but as memories. And memories are voices that never truly fade. Still, Cole knew the silence would never be gone forever. It would wait. It would watch. And if another voice screamed across the stars, without care, the silence would return. So they made a choice. Not to forget what had happened, but to protect what had survived. A council was formed. Not of generals, not of rulers, but of listeners, poets, historians, and dreamers. They would guard the memory. They would decide if the railgun would ever fire again. Cole walked through the halls of the memory vault. Walls lined with light, sound, art, history, moments frozen in time. He touched a panel. It played the voice of a girl laughing, a child who once lived on Europa, lost during the Great Silence. Now remembered. He moved to another, a painting drawn by a man on Mars, colors no longer known in human eyes, but now painted with perfect strokes. Returned from the silence. These were the pieces they had saved. Not with force, not with weapons, but with truth. Selin worked on a new device, not to fight, but to record. A beacon not of power, but of memory. She called it the Keeper. It would float in orbit above Earth, not hidden, not armed, just listening, just remembering. In case the silence ever returned, the Keeper would speak again. 1 year passed. The railgun was sealed beneath the surface of the moon. Not destroyed, not feared, just silent, like a book no longer opened, but never burned. Cole stepped onto a small transport headed for Mars. He looked out the window. The stars blinked softly. No longer cold, no longer empty. They were full of songs, of stories, of life. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in a long time, he dreamed. He dreamed of a world filled with sound, of people dancing under starlight, of ships moving like birds through golden skies, of children building towers that touched the clouds. And in that dream, he saw her, Dr. Eris, standing at the edge of a quiet sea, her hand reaching into the water, pulling light from beneath the surface, smiling. When he woke, the stars were still shining. Selen sent him a message from Earth. The keeper had received a signal, not from within the system, not from any known species, but it was not a warning, not a threat. It was a song, a melody played with instruments unknown, soft, warm, hopeful. The council gathered to listen. They played the song across every channel, and people stopped to hear it, in homes, in schools, in ships floating between moons. Every ear heard it, and every heart remembered. Not all silence is empty. Some silence waits for the right voice. Humanity had learned to listen, to speak with care, to remember, not to shout into the dark, but to whisper with purpose, to share, not to command, to ask, not to take. And so the keeper was joined by others, built not to guard, but to connect, across the stars. One by one, they reached out, and slowly, gently, the universe whispered back, not with words, but with memory. And the stars did not go silent again.